Nice, dude.
So what should we talk about?
I was struck in the prayer just then, asking for peace and joy and fun for Mike as he is ministering to 50,000 people on post. And just, I had this image actually earlier in the week. It was one of the readings. Well, today was I send you like sheep among wolves. It's been all these readings in Matthew, I think, of sending the apostles out. And just how kind of absurd it is, like how ragtag this group is and how helpless and unequipped they are for this immense task of evangelizing the entire world. And how if you wanted to set it up as like a joke, that'd be a good way to do it. And it reminded me of the two standards meditation, which we've talked about before, and like the invisible reality versus the visible reality. And Satan, his army appears strong and he lures people in with riches and pride, whereas Jesus's army appears weak and lowly and poor, and he attracts his soldiers through insults and humility. And I thought of like me and Bern watched The Goonies last week, which I had never seen all the way through. I think it was too ribald for me when I was a little kid, so I wasn't allowed to watch it. But I remember like the pirate ship scene at the end and stuff. It was a bit rough, and it was a lot of screaming, which I'm not a huge fan of movies with that just is screaming the whole time.
Hey, what does the word ribald mean? I'm asking
Ribald.
for Rob.
Ribald. It's like
Thank you.
You're welcome.
like innuendo and double entendre, sexual humor, basically.
Oh, okay.
I think so. Yeah, referring to sexual matters in an amusingly coarse or irreverent way.
Okay.
There
you go, Rob.
So just so you know, Rob. But
moving on,
I thought of like, or the Lost Boys from Peter Pan, like this just group of kind of children playing make believe, and the thing that God, the reason God gives us a job is not because He's like really in need of our help. That's sort of a ridiculous thing to think metaphysically. So if the only reason He gives us something to do is to draw us close to Him, and share His joy. So that prayer just really struck me. Like that's what we've been talking about these last few weeks too, and living the Christian life, like getting caught up so much in what we are doing. And this has been a big thing for me in the last year or so, just through IPF and my own interior life, like serving God or serving my list of accomplishments or record that's more or less unstained by sin. So I'm scot-free. Like I don't owe God anything. That sort of idolatry of self-aggrandizement rather than just being a little kid with a toy sword who's whipping the devil's butt because I'm humble and I don't think about myself and I'm not trying to hoard up good works to show God what a good guy I am and prove to Him and make it impossible for Him not to love me. You know what I mean? So like 50,000 soldiers and one priest, there it is. Like you can still be joyful. You have to be.
Mm-hmm.
Because what are you going to do? Be like, that's my job. I guess this is what Jesus wants, is for me to just be miserable and suffer and never say no.
I know.
You know what I mean?
Actually, two things that come to mind as we're just talking about it right now is, one, I've recognized that I have the temptation more than I did at the parish. I would shirk it a bit more. I would intentionally shirk it hard at the parish.
Shirk it hard.
Shirk it hard. Band name, I call it.
I was gonna say it's kind of a dance move.
Is the need to describe to everybody how busy you are.
Yeah,
man,
dude,
that's like that. I feel that's definitely a part of the army culture, where you just kind of catch up and you're like, what's going on? And you're like, dude, I can't believe it's still today because I've done so many things today. And
Right.
you're like, oh
No, but
man,
check
tell
this out
me.
though, dude. Check out how much stuff I've done.
Yeah. Well, my day, it's actually 2 days because I didn't sleep last night because I was doing so many things during the night, which is all one day. What? Your days are only 24 hours? Mine are 48 hours. It's
Wow.
like very tempting to do. And especially when you have I almost did it right there. Especially when you have a reason because you actually are so busy, which I am, obviously. Okay. Um, that's like something that I feel very powerfully. And I think a part of it is because you also get rated. And so there's this like
RATED.
RATED. Is that what
Yeah,
you
not
said?
raided, as in like they're raiding your room and tossing cells and seeing if you
No,
have
yeah,
contraband.
not. Although that does happen too. That we had, yeah. So it's the RATED, which is like a little subtle incentive to let people know what you're doing, so that then you can be rewarded for it on your evaluations. And
Mhm.
so like that's also a part of the subculture to it. But
Dude, imagine if your Uber driver, who also gets rated, was letting you know, like, I'm using my turn signal right now, just so you know. I've been driving all day and I use two hands.
yeah, are you kidding
10
me?
and
Look at
2,
this.
baby. 10 and 2 here. All right. How
Uh-huh.
are you?
Yeah.
Had a long
Sticking
day.
it 40 mph. Are you seeing that? Right? Do you see that speed limit sign? You see that odometer right there? Speedometer. But then the Grace like, I remember thinking about my kind of big families that um for a helicopter parent to be a helicopter parent, it's only possible if you have limited number of people to helicopter over. And then if you have 11 people to helicopter as a parent, it becomes so overwhelmingly impossible that you have to give up on that's clearly not possible. So
Hmm.
you have to give up on the venture entirely, and you have to find a new way to parent because you can't hover over 11 children. So actually the impossibility of the task frees you from like a lie that comes along with the task. And that's kind of how I feel, honestly. Like 50,000 soldiers, one priest. They're like, you just got to let it go, man, or
Yeah.
else you're going to drive yourself nuts. Like if a parent tried to hover over 11 different children to protect them and keep them safe and provide everything that they need and be at their beck and call for everything, it's like you would lose your mind. So you just have to give it away
Hmm.
and then just parent the way that the Lord is calling you to parent there. And I don't think I made that connection until you kind of mentioned that. But like honestly, that's kind of that's the only sane approach to being a
Hmm.
priest for 50,000 soldiers. And I
And
think
you're
that's
not
actually a
even just
grace.
you're not even just the priest too, because don't you have kind of administrative chaplain type duties with the army? It's not like you're
Yeah.
just there to be the spiritual support. You actually have a job, I assume.
hmm Yeah. Yeah. So then I have a specific battalion of probably 700 that I'm their chaplain no matter what. And then I have Catholic coverage for everybody else. So yeah, it's a task that's so clearly impossible that it's like I'm not an idiot, and thanks be to God. Um, I know that's not possible. So it's a grace in that sense, I think. Um,
This may be a bad analogy, but I remember hearing it described what fighting forest fires in Alaska was like. Because in the summer the mosquitoes are so bad, it's just like they're swarming you constantly. You're just walking through clouds of mosquitoes, and first year firefighters, they don't allow them to use bug spray for the whole summer because it would drive you crazy if you thought bug spray would solve this problem. Like you just have to
hmm.
live in the cloud. Maybe
Hmm.
it's a bad analogy because parishioners are not blood sucking insects, but that sounds a little demeaning, but it's a similar principle at work there. Like you start to just like swat, and or you can just let it go and be like, I'm not going to get out of this unbitten, unwounded. I just need to I need to fight this fire, or do this job. That's my perfectionist thing, is like, if I'm serving the record, if I'm serving the list of things I've done for God rather than God, then I have to make sure I'm constantly thinking about myself, and I'm thinking about that list, and I'm thinking about how I'm doing, and am I rating, and making sure people see it, or I see it, or God sees it, or whatever. And rather than just being responsive to reality, you know, um, responsible to reality too, not just like, oh, I'm whatever comes up or whatever I feel like doing, I'm just going to do. You have an ordered life and discipline and stuff, but you are not so wrapped up. And that's what I worry about your guy, not to make a thing of it, but he leaves because he's burnt out, and then you're in charge, and then you get burnt out, and you're just waiting for the next priest to come. And like, that's a bad move, rather than like, oh, I'm living such a full life right now. We have a second priest. What an embarrassment of riches. Like, welcome into this life of communion that I'm living on this base here. I don't think that's unrealistic, to live priesthood that way. Because it's not like it's just you figuring it out and life hacking your way to like a peaceful life. It's living in reality. It's like that thing about the parents. Like, you cannot do this job perfectly, so stop trying, or don't think that that's the object of the game. I don't
Voila.
know how
Good.
long we were gonna
Yeah.
we were gonna keep it
Good.
quiet. People are like hitting pause or play. Like, did they stop? Is the episode over? I've also heard it described as man coverage. Well, first it's double team, and it's just one kid. Then you have two kids, and it's man coverage. Then you go to 3 kids, and you're doing zone.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, it
Yeah.
was something. Well, go on, Rob.
No, it's fun. I agree, like, very much, with all that. And it's not like trying to in any way to like compare scenarios or anything like that. Um but I think it's like it's been a really nice summer so far, and I was telling you guys about how like fruitful vacation was, and just around like really good friends and really good people that I'm very, very grateful for. And so I've been able to reflect in different ways how, yeah, I think there's actually been an awareness, like, most of the time, and in certain moments of it, like, being really overwhelming, of like new responsibilities and um like things that are on your plate, like, at least in my life, and to where it's not 50,000 soldiers, but it's still responsibilities of like, man, okay, this isn't like, you can't helicopter parent this, like, to use that good analogy there. But man, there's a lot of moments of like just feeling overwhelmed and blindsided a lot, like, and everything like that. But I think what's fun right now is just to kind of be in a place where you kind of feel more and more like on solid ground, and like your feet are getting under you in a way, and like you just have, I don't know, like creativity starts to come in, and all of that as well. So anyway, nothing specific there. I was just thinking on that. I think that's the fruit of like what you guys were saying there.
Yeah, dude, it's it's been fruitful prayer and just kind of like thought process for me. Was it something that I mentioned a while back on the podcast that was genius? No
I was gonna
surprise.
say, something I said really struck me.
But I took it from Benedict in the Intro to Christianity, and so I guess credit where credit's due. I'll give credit to Benedict, um, but he talks about a description of what faith really is, and that in the modern I guess it'd be even, well, probably post-Enlightenment stage of history that we have looked at faith from the perspective of like practical application, almost as a tool to be used. And so he describes it as like a techne knowledge, or a techne virtue. Like it's almost like an artifact that can be used to create, so that it's viewed by its utility, and
Faith.
it's faith, faith. So he says the kind of post Enlightenment understanding of faith is uh, knowing leads to creating, but actual faith is where you stand leads to understanding. So knowing leads to creating, which is like you
Knowledge is
see that,
power, Francis Bacon. Like the
and
science, the more we know, the more we can do.
which we also bought into from the faith perspective, which is the more that you know about the faith, the better of a Christian that you are, and the better of a Christian that you are, the more you go out and change the world. Go make a difference. We can
You
make a
can make a
difference.
difference.
So that's like, that song is oddly enough is like a microcosm of that train of thought, where
Semi-Pelagians. We are semi-Pelagians.
which it turns faith and Christianity and relationship with Christ into like a type of philanthropy, where it's only good so far as it benefits what you make and create in the world. And he says that's not, that comes at it from almost the perspective of the agere, like to do. But what it really means to be Christian, and what faith authentically means, is it's who you are, and who you are is it's where you stand. And what you're talking about, like feeling that firmness where you can stand, that faith is it, and it this is kind of my interpretation of it, is it's like the place in reality where you choose to remain, to stand, that you take in the rest of reality. So that's the perspective that you actually engage life from. And the perspective is everything, which also fits with kind of like the relativistic mindset. I think that's actually true. Where you stand, it actually shapes what you're looking at. And the proper place to stand is with Christ, to actually understand reality as it is. And that has just been like a really simple, that's such a simple idea. It's like, where am I standing today? Not like, am I learning more? Am I doing more for Christ? But it's like, from what place did I take in the day from? From what place did I stand from? And I had a real big grace. It was today, celebrating Mass, that I love after receiving communion, just like putting my hands on the altar, and hearing DMAC talk about at the Mass, the altar is Christ. And so you just received Christ, and there you're standing in front of the altar as a priest celebrating Mass. And like, I like to put my hands on the altar to kind of feel the altar. And it was like, dude, this is the place to stand. It's like, this is it. This is where I want to stand. And I don't even know what I'm thinking right now, but my whole priesthood, I just want to stand here. And so like all these other things can kind of come and go, but as long as I'm standing at this altar, like I think the rest will take care of itself, you know? And so it's just like a really concrete moment of clarity of what I think that concept looks like in real life. But I also felt very grounded, like I had that solid footing under me. It's like that's where I want to stand as a priest, and I think that's authentic faith right there. So Ratzinger's description of that, I don't know if that made sense to you guys, but it's been simple, not simplistic, but simple, and really helpful in kind of entering into an environment and like a landscape that's really constantly fluctuating and moving. And it's like, where do I get my feet set here? And Christ always offers that, you know?
No, it's good, man. Yeah, that's really good. And even, I don't think this will pivot really, but I was thinking when one of the things I've reflected on since being back, and in a sense, when I was gone for those couple weeks, like I was with my family for a week, and then I was up with the Wichita guys, and then I stayed in Lincoln with like good friends Drew and Emily, and saw Martha, and I thought, man, I was like a part of in that vacation, like 3 very distinct and unique cultures, like microcosms. But I was like very comfortable. This takes me back to actually the last podcast, maybe one of the last podcasts we did, of just like feeling like the objective reality has been there, but feeling more and more of like, no, when I'm home doing laundry, like I'm a priest. And like that was just a felt thing in all of these like stellar Catholic cultures, like whether it be my family or the Wichita guys or my friends in Lincoln. And I was telling you before the cast, I mean, I literally, like, after being back a couple of days, like I wept in a holy hour, like just thinking about how grateful I am, like for like those people. And it was kind of funny in a way of like, oh my gosh, all of those people are like so like good and like just better people than me. It's like this undeserved gratitude, in it. But then even being back, like settled in like very quickly to the parish here, and like the summer schedule and everything. But I just love that image of like Christ being the altar, and like the grounding was there, to where it was almost like this, just in the last 3 weeks of my life, been able to see like different angles of this prism of like whatever that reality is, but like he's the same in all of that. I don't know if that fits at all or makes sense. It was just, yeah, thinking about my last couple weeks in the context of it.
Yeah, it's like this. It's this interior drama that we're describing. That's not like, the first question that comes to my mind is, how is this not quietism? What we're describing, which is that you can't do anything. God has to do everything. So just sit and pray and never do anything, because God doesn't need you to do anything anyway. So that's the extreme. But both things are true. Never, that it is true that we can't add anything to God's greatness. And yet he tells us, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. He gives us this job to do as his priests, that he needs us to do. He makes himself vulnerable and need us. I remember that was a big moment. Like my first year in the parish was on a long day. I thought I'd been doing a lot of work, and somebody called the parish and needed me to bring them communion to a dying elderly relative. And I went and got Jesus in the tabernacle and put him in my pocket and in my picks, and drove to this house. And I was just like, Lord, why would you make yourself need me to drive you to this person's house? And it was one of those kind of aha moments, like the baby Jesus. Why would God make himself need us so much, be so vulnerable, precisely to call us out of ourselves? And so like there's this interplay between the rock just standing there next to this rock, Jesus, and being like, I can do nothing without you. And so I just want to stand here all day. And then he like also sends us out like sheep among wolves, and don't take a money sack or anything. Like, glorify me by living insanely holy lives, be saints, so both things are true. It's not quietism, but it's this interior drama that most of the action is invisible. In fact, all the interesting action is invisible, like holiness and stuff. I'm just worried about your salvation and stuff. Nacho Libre.
What does he say? Don't hate me just because
I believe in science.
I believe in science. Oh man, you got me on that.
But I watched, talking about holiness and stuff, I watched a secret a secret sneak preview of the Michelle Dupont documentary. Which, Rob, have you seen that?
No, I heard her cause is open, but I haven't seen
Mm-hmm.
anything of the
They
documentary.
showed it, I think, to Focus missionaries at new staff training. It's like the early cut, so I'm sure it'll be coming out soon. But it's a beautiful story. And were you on her team?
No, she was at. So we overlapped in focus, but we were never on the same team. She was at Nebraska before I was, so we were never on the same team.
So Focus missionary, she died of cancer when she was like in her early 30s, I guess.
Yeah. Yep.
Scott knew her from his time in Lincoln. Maybe Derek knew her from being at Focus Missionaries at the same time. So they used to go when she was at Cancer Center of America, in Chicago at the Cancer Center. They'd go visit her, and that's how I'd heard her name before. But just an ordinary story of holiness. But there was this one moment that really got me, where the doctor basically came in, who'd been her doctor for months, trying to fight this cancer, came in and basically gave her the news, like, there's a time when there's just not anything else we can do, and you have to let nature take its course. And her sister was telling the story of how she put her head down, and a few seconds later just looked up at the doctor and said, "Doctor," and whatever his name was, like, "How are you doing today?" Like, basically just forget herself, like. And it was almost like a techne. It's almost like Faith was a little hack there of like, how do I not get lost in this sadness? But I don't think it was like, when I heard that story, it was more like, blessed are those who mourn, like you're not lost in your sadness. It like stimulates you to be a more generous person. Like your heart is pierced and therefore open to others. And I think that to me is actually interesting. Or blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. I'm reading this book on the Beatitudes right now, so I'm thinking of this. But that actually Mal Kloss sent me, and you.
I haven't started it yet, but
that's good. It's good stuff.
Out. Yeah.
This is in lieu of a thank you note, but I still do owe her a thank you note.
Thanks, Mal,
if she listens. But blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Her point in the book is like, what that doesn't mean is really, really pining after other people being better people. Like my hunger and thirst for righteousness is like political primarily. It might eventually manifest itself in some kind of political action, but those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, first of all, hunger for holiness in their own life, And so a practical implication of that is that any correction that Christ might give me, like, remove this obstacle to holiness in your life, or do this thing, do this act of generosity, I will make you holy by it. You're just hungry. Lord, correct me, which I'm not that hungry for that, but like when I read that, I thought, I will hungry to be hungry for it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to want that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That kind of freedom.
Yeah.
It reminds me in a way of, I just heard the story of Monsignor Greg Ketchum. Did you ever overlap with him at U of I, Connor?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so he died of cancer. Like, I think when we were in Santa Barbara on our canonical retreat. So that was like 2018 that he died of cancer, because we were there when he died. But not to draw out the story, but when he would always be meticulous when he purified the vessels at Mass. And that when I was a college student, that like impacted me greatly. And I just thought it was really cool. And like he had this deep reverence for the Blessed Sacrament, all of that. And I found out later through guys that knew him like better and in a different way than I did as a student, is that he was like hyper scrupulous in his life, like really, really scrupulous. But I just recently heard I was visiting with another guy from that era that I know pretty well, and that knew him really, really well, and said like part of the purification in his life when he was getting sick, my summation would just be like this kind of deepening of a friendship with Jesus. And so he was still like meticulous when he would purify vessels, as he like knew he was going to die, and he was growing in acceptance and surrender to that. But it became like a practice not out of scrupulosity, but out of reverence. And it was like this subtle thing that externally looked the exact same as like 5 or 10 years before.
Mm-hmm.
But only like probably the 2 or 3 people that knew him best, like even had any notion of what was going on internally with that.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that was like such a cool and like, yeah, beautiful story in a way, but it seemed to be hitting at the same thing.
Yeah, man. And that's what I mean about like the list. My unstained record is like scrupulosity is I'm doing this because I'm afraid of messing up and what that would mean, which is that I can't be sure that I'm loved because I've done everything necessary to force you to love me. Rather, can I do the same thing, purify the vessels very attentively in a way that's like tender and loving, because I'm so grateful for this gift that even the tiniest bit of Jesus's body and blood I want to reverence. Looks exact same way maybe, but it's like a totally different attitude of mind. And it's a gift too. Like that's the other thing, is that it has to be him who instructs us. Like even that itself, I think, is a temptation of like, how do I become more tender and loving rather than so slavish and fearful? I don't know. That's part of the drama as well. In my life, at least, like I can't, it's God's time, like it's even that hunger for holiness. I have to wait for him to correct me and give me the grace to accept correction. So then what's the point, Thomas Merton? Prayer is not something we do. It's something God does in us. So am I praying right now? That
I would
always
say
drove
you're
me
for
crazy.
sure going and making a difference.
Go make a difference, man.
So
That's
are
just
we praying
objectively
right now?
a bad song.
It is. It is.
No, I mean, not even just like the theology. It's just really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
It's
okay
like
with
Hey
that going
Soul
out to the
Sister by
internet.
Train.
No, it's Hey Soul Sister's way better.
Yeah, I would
Go make a difference.
I mean, the last thought that I have on
Agreed.
your quietism question is like I think because it's not just an internal reality. Like I think it's real that so like some of the stuff that Christ claims and that his incarnation brings into the world is that he's really changed all of reality, that he's going to be with us always, that he is in all things in all places at all times, which is like a big broad metaphysical claim, but we know that that's actually true because of the revelation of Jesus, which means that like you can stand with Christ at the altar and be playing football with soldiers out in the middle of the field. Like that's entirely possible because so you don't have to be locked into physical prayer at all times, but it's like I don't know, a posture or a disposition that you encounter all of reality with at all times. And that's true because like metaphysically, like Jesus is in all places at all times. So you can stand with him everywhere, no matter what. And so you don't have to be locked into, I think of it as a juxtaposition or maybe an expansion of the Israelite understanding of God, that like how can we praise God outside of Jerusalem, outside of our Holy Land? Like they had to go through that process of this destruction of what they believed God was, that he was kind of bound to a certain place or certain time, and then he recreated it and then rebuilt it and expanded it. So like, oh no, you're like way more than I understood. And honestly, like maybe this isn't totally right, but like it's like the hoverboard. It's like you just stand there, dude, and he's just gonna zing you around, but like
Right.
always be there. that it's not a place that's just locked into like a specific, like now I'm going to pray. Now I'm standing with Jesus. Like, no, that's just a way of being. And I think that's Ratzinger's point. It's a way to be, not something that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so just stand with Jesus at all times. And that's actually possible because it's literally metaphysically true. That like he has transformed all of reality through his incarnation. Because we believe like God is who he says he is. I am who I am. So that's like it's a broad claim. That's like really unbelievably true. So it's like an internal drama, but I think it actually is happening in real time, if that makes any sense.
Definitely. Yeah, I think the invisible reality is more real than the visible reality, which is why political action, if anything, is just like a byproduct of this primary reality, which is invisible and much more important and actually durable, fruit that will last.
Right. Yep.
But more importantly, the hoverboard in Back to the Future, was it 3, the one that's in the future where he's wearing 2 ties? That's where the hoverboards come in. Anyway, I seem to remember that they worked like skateboards, but you didn't need to like push off from the ground. You like pushed off the air, right?
What?
Because he went over remember he goes over the
You're
water
right.
fountain.
They can't go over water though.
Oh, they can't go over water.
No.
So he gets caught up there.
Right. So where does how do you explain that, Mets?
Yeah, especially with
Yeah.
the walking on water.
Right.
Gotcha.
Man.
Cut it. We're not going to air this episode. Okay?
We've been podcasting
We went down
in
a blind
early
alley.
mornings for a long time, and we're better at that than late night podcasts.
All right. Good talk, yo.
Yeah.
Good to see you guys.
It's good to see you. See you soon.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
for sure.